It should be clear by now that the modern technological and scientific agenda is built upon the same spiritual philosophies as ancient alchemy. The desire for man to create artificial life and as a result play God is nothing new. One of the goals for the alchemists was to create what is known as the golem, an animated anthropomorphic being created purely out of inanimate matter through magical workings. The Hebrew word golem is used once in the Bible and is found in Psalms 139:16, translated as unformed substance. Quote, "Your eyes saw my unformed substance. In your book were written, every one of them, the days that were formed for me, when as yet there was none of them." According to Talmudic legends, Adam was initially created by God as a golem, or as a body without a soul, for the first 12 hours of his existence. The substance that gave his mindless body a soul was the breath of God. It was at this point that man became the image bearers of God. Quote, "Then the Lord God formed the man of dust from the ground, and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life, and the man became a living soul." While it is appropriate for God himself to create life out of non-life, it is easy to see that man attempting to do the same is in essence playing out the lie that was promised to us before the fall of mankind. The methods to form a golem were vast and complex, involving everything from meditative techniques, numerological markings, and ritual chanting. There are many Jewish traditions of holy rabbis and sages creating a golem. For example, when Eliezer of Worms, a 12th century Talmudist and mystic, commented on the Sefer Yezerah, or what is known as the Book of Formation, one of the earliest Kabbalistic writings, he gave a detailed and complex report of how to form a golem through advanced spiritual meditative techniques called the 221 gates. But perhaps the most famous golem is the one allegedly created by Rabbi Yehuda Levi ben Betzalel of Prague, known as the Maharal, in the 16th century. The legend goes that the Maharal created a golem named Yosel to help save the Jews of Prague from the blood libel, an early form of anti-Semitism where cults derived from Roman Catholicism falsely accused the Jews for kidnapping and murdering children to use their blood in religious rituals. After fulfilling his purpose, the golem Yosel was deanimated by the Maharal. It is widely believed that Yosel's body was stored and still lays in the attic of Prague's Old New Synagogue, a building that was curiously not destroyed by the Nazis in World War II. In fact, it is believed that the Gestapo didn't even enter the attic when they took hold of the synagogue. This is no surprise, since it is well known that Hitler spoke often of the Übermensch to describe the National Socialist agenda of creating a biological superior Aryan race that would rule the earth for 1,000 years. In alchemy, it was the 16th century alchemist and occultist named Paracelsus who described how to create the golem, referred to as the homunculus in alchemical terms. In the Hermetic and Alchemical writings of Paracelsus, he said, quote, "But neither must we by any means forget the generation of homunculi, for there is some truth in this thing, although for a long time it was held in a most occult manner and with secrecy, while there was no little doubt and question among some of the old philosophers whether it was possible to nature and art that a man should be begotten without the female body and the natural womb. In order to accomplish it, you must proceed thus. Let the semen of a man putrefy by itself in a sealed cucurbite with the highest putrefaction until it begins to live, move, and be agitated, which can easily be seen. If now, after this, it be every day nourished and fed cautiously and prudently with the arcanum of human blood and kept for 40 weeks in the perpetual and equal heat, it becomes, thenceforth, a true and living infant, having all the members of a child that is born from a woman, but much smaller. This we call a homunculus, and it should be afterwards educated with the greatest care and zeal until it grows up and begins to display intelligence. Now this is one of the greatest secrets which God has revealed to mortal and fallible man. It is a miracle and marvel of God, an arcanum above arcana, and deserves to be kept secret until the last times, when there shall be nothing hidden, but all things shall be made manifest. In more recent times, it was the pioneer rocket fuel scientist and occultist Jack Parsons and the founder of Scientology, L. Ron Hubbard, who performed magical ceremonies and rituals called Babylon working, carrying on the work done by occultist Aleister Crowley, who called himself the Great Beast 666. Parsons and Hubbard claimed to make contact with the spiritual realm to unleash an entity of a divine female named Babylon. But perhaps the most interesting part of all the rituals performed by Parsons and Hubbard was that of what is called the mannequin. The account of the mannequin begins with a huge steel container codenamed Jumbo that accompanied the first atomic bomb explosion on the Trinity site in New Mexico on July 16, 1945. The Brookings Institute released a short explanation of Jumbo in February of 2013, which stated, quote, "As preparations for the first nuclear weapons test, General Leslie Groves, the head of the Manhattan Project, began to worry about what would happen if the test was a failure. With a very limited supply of plutonium then available, a failure could scatter tens of millions of dollars of the precious element across the New Mexico desert. To avoid this problem, a massive steel vessel to contain the explosion was built at a cost of $142 million. Nicknamed Jumbo, the container weighed 214 tons, was 25 feet long, 12 feet wide, and had walls 14 inches thick. According to occult investigators and conspiracy theorists James Shelby Downard and William N. Grimstead, Jumbo contained within it what Aleister Crowley had called the mannequin, an inanimate body which was inundated with nuclear energy, thus producing a real homunculus, or golem. Regardless of whether or not the stories of these occult practices to produce soulless life forms are true or not, it doesn't make much difference with what we are facing on the horizon. What we will come to discover is that Satan's grand agenda is to produce his own golem or homunculi out of the human race, so that we might abandon the image of God in exchange for the image of the beast.
You know, the image of the beast, I believe, is going to be a copy of the image that God made back in the beginning. Now, the image that God made in the very beginning was, of course, Adam. So God took the dirt, he formed Adam to both look like himself and to act like himself. Now, the idea that Adam actually looked like God is somewhat contested among theologians. But if you go back and we just look at what the word image means, we see that Adam had a son in his image and in his likeness. We go to, for example, Ezekiel chapter 1, where Ezekiel sees the image of God above this throne, and it says that he looked like Adam. If we go to Daniel chapter 7, we see that the Ancient of Days was seated, and he had his hair, and he's got a form. Moses, Aaron, Nadav, Abihu, and the 70 elders of Israel. So many places where it tells us what God looks like. Even Jesus said, if you've seen me, you've seen the Father. So God does have a form. We are created to look accordingly to that form. We're not obviously the same as God, but we look like God to a lesser extent. And therefore, I think the motto is, anything you can do, I can do better. I think that's Satan's basic idea here, that, you know, he can also create someone in his image and in his likeness. And I think, you know, if we look at it, you have Satan is equivalent to the Father. The Antichrist would be equivalent to Jesus the Son, and then the false prophet would be analogous to the Holy Spirit. So these three in one, as it were, now are going to create someone who is in their image. And I believe that is what the image of the beast is all about. It's now acting as God acted in the beginning to now create a counterfeit, but still someone who is in their own image. And I don't believe that the image of the beast is going to be a real live person. He may look completely real, he may act like a human, but he does not have a soul. And we know that because at the end of all things, when the Antichrist and the false prophet are thrown into the lake of fire, there's no mention of the image of the beast. He's not judged. He just simply appears to just go away, because he's not really he's not a person of any sort.
The The achievement of a technological singularity will be the ultimate fulfillment of Satan's plan in making himself like the Most High God. While there are many brilliant Bible scholars and commentators who have varying perspectives of how the end times will unfold, my goal here is not to promote a particular timeline, but rather speculate as to how the Bible may reveal the role of artificial intelligence and the technological singularity. In Revelation chapter 13, we see a startling description of what to expect in the end times. Verses 11 through 18 provides a profile and the actions of the second beast. It reads, quote, "Then I saw another beast rising out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, and it spoke like a dragon. It exercises all the authority of the first beast in its presence, and makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose mortal wound was healed. It performs great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to earth in front of people. And by the signs that it is allowed to work in the presence of the beast, it deceives those who dwell on earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that was wounded by the sword and yet lived. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might even speak, and might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. And it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast, or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast. For it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. To begin, it is important to point out that the second beast is otherwise known as the false prophet. Recent Bible scholars and authors, Tom Horn and Chris Putnam, in their books Petros Romanus, The Final Pope is Here, and the follow-up Exo Vaticana, Petros Romanus and the Vatican's Astonishing Plans for the Arrival of an Alien Savior, have raised the possibility that our current Pope, Pope Francis, would not only be the final Pope as prophesied in the prophecy of the popes allegedly written by St. Malachi in the 12th century, but the false prophet himself. Revelation 13:11 states that the false prophet will have 2 horns like a lamb, but speak like a dragon. The dragon is undoubtedly Satan, but what is amazing is that the current pope is loved and adored by the world. Time magazine chose Pope Francis as Time's Person of the Year for 2013, and his popularity is steadily increasing. Still, I am not ready to say that Pope Francis is the false prophet described in Revelation 13. However, given the circumstances of the various aspects that Tom Horn and Chris Putnam have pointed out regarding the Vatican and their potential plans to reveal an extraterrestrial presence on Earth, I cannot rule out the possibility. If Pope Francis is the false prophet, then we would have to see the Antichrist rise to power first, conquer several nations surrounding Israel, and be killed in the process. This is because Revelation 13 tells us that it is the false prophet who uses miracles to resurrect the first beast, whose mortal wound was healed. In fact, his counterfeit signs and miracles are so powerful that he even calls fire down from heaven to earth in front of people. Perhaps this fire that comes down from heaven in front of people has to do with the extraterrestrial presence that is due to be revealed. This is likely since we know that the coming of the lawless one will be led by the activity of Satan with all power and false signs and wonders. This call of fire down from heaven might be a counterfeit to Elijah in 2 Kings 1 as a way to deceitfully convince the world that he possesses the spirit of Elijah, as did John the Baptist, paving the way for Jesus. In light of these possibilities, as Horn and Putnam have pointed out, it is quite startling that the Vatican owns some of the most powerful telescopes in the world. The Vatican Advanced Technology Telescope sits on top of the Mount Graham International Observatory in southeast Arizona. Next to this telescope on Mount Graham is another telescope, the Large Binocular Telescope named Lucifer, which stands for Large Binocular Telescope Near Infrared Utility with Camera and Integral Field Unit for Extragalactic Research. If the Vatican and the papacy does not have anything to do with what is prophesied in Revelation 13, why do they own the most powerful telescope in the world, and what are they looking for? Regardless of how it plays out, the display of calling fire down from heaven will give the false prophet great authority. It will be with this authority that the false prophet will tell the people of the earth to build an image for the beast that was wounded by the sword, yet lived. It is important to point out that the image will be built by the people. It is again my speculation that this image will be highly technical in nature. There are several points to consider in this theory. First, Alluding back to the connection with the Vatican, it was reported on the Vatican Insider by Andrea Tornielli in an article titled "The Vatican Invests in Cutting-Edge Technology and Regular Bug-Clearing Operations" that, quote, "The Vatican does not rely on special external companies. Instead, it has purchased cutting-edge instruments and technologies of its own, some of which are made in Israel." Such information brings light to another point. Israel, where the image of the beast will be erected on the rebuilt Third Temple, is very engaged in scientific and technological inquiry, with the highest percentage spent on research and development in relation to gross domestic product in the world. As a result, Israeli scientists have contributed to the advancement of computer science, electronics, genetics, healthcare, optics, solar energy, and various fields of engineering. In fact, in 2012, the chairman of Google, Eric Schmidt, went on record saying that, quote, "Israel has the most important high-tech center in the world after the US." Even more, the IEEE, the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineering Intelligent Systems magazine, named 2 PhD graduates of computer science at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, Dr. Aviv Zohar and Dr. Ariel Prokasia, as 2 of the top 10 researchers who are rising stars in the field of artificial intelligence. In an article published by The Telegraph entitled "The Rabbi, the Lost Ark, and the Future of the Temple Mount," quotes Rabbi Chaim Richman, international director for the Temple Institute in Jerusalem. After claiming that Jews have known the location of the Ark of the Covenant for centuries, he goes on to describe his aspirations for the Third Temple. Quote, "There's no reason why we shouldn't use technology, which is the modern miracle, alongside the heavenly miracles. It's part of our vision of the temple as a realistic potential in our times." If that weren't enough, during the editing process of this film, 2 pieces of information became public to bolster this thesis even more. First is that the Israeli housing minister called for the building of the Third Temple.
Israel says it's planning to replace the Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem and Quds with a temple. The Minister of Housing and Construction has called for the construction of what he calls the Third Temple to replace the holy site. Uri Ariel says the first and the second temples were destroyed many years ago, so the third one needs to be built now. Al-Aqsa Mosque is considered the third holiest site in Islam. Palestinians have denounced the plan as desecration. They say it's part of Israel's ongoing attempts to distort the Arab and Islamic history. Palestinians argue that Jerusalem is the capital of a future Palestinian independent state and that its heritage should remain intact.
Secondly, Infowars.com reported on January 27, 2014, that during the Cybertech 2014 conference held in Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu proposed establishing a, quote, kind of UN of the internet led by Israel. According to the article, Netanyahu stated, quote, "We need a coalition of leading companies with capabilities in this world. This is the best thing that we can do to deal with the challenges. In my opinion, Israel is the leader in this field. We decided to concentrate these skills and establish a consortium of our security agencies, research institutes, and businesses. We think we can turn the curse of the internet into a blessing because we all need it. We set up a special organization, a cyber headquarters, to see how it is possible to combine these capabilities with others. This is something we all want to see, a cyber world that is open, free, and prosperous, in which everyone participates. When you think about cyber, you'll think about Israel." After the image of the beast is built, the false prophet will, quote, "give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might even speak and might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain." In Matthew 24, Jesus warns about the abomination of desolation. Quote, "So when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel standing in the holy place, let the reader understand, and let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains." What Jesus is referring to here are several passages in the book of Daniel that speaks about the end times abomination. Daniel 11:31 states, quote, Forces from him shall appear and profane the temple of fortress, and shall take away the regular burnt offering, and they shall set up the abomination that makes desolate. Then in Daniel 12:11 it states, quote, "And from the time that the regular burnt offering is taken away, and the abomination that makes desolate is set up, there shall be 1,290 days." Most Bible prophecy scholars believe that the abomination of desolation is the Antichrist himself. However, there are some who believe that the abomination of desolation itself is actually the image of the beast. Warren Wendell Wiersbe, a Bible scholar and pastor, stated in 1992 in his expository outline on the New Testament, quote, "The false prophet is the one who orders the image of the beast made. This is the abomination of desolation found in Matthew 24:15, Daniel 11:45, and 2 Thessalonians 2:4. The beast will have his image set up in the restored Jewish temple in Jerusalem at this time. This image will come to life. It will speak and greatly amaze the world. Both the beast and his image will speak great things and utter blasphemies against heaven." Then, in his Bible exposition commentary on Revelation 13:11, he states, quote, "What is the abomination of desolation? It is the image of the beast set up in the temple in Jerusalem. An idol is bad enough, but setting it up in the temple is the height of all blasphemy. Since Satan could not command worship in heaven, he will go to the next best place, the Jewish temple in the holy city. The false prophet, energized by Satan, will perform his lying wonders and even duplicate some of the signs performed by the two witnesses. Upon this time, the two witnesses have been ministering at the temple in Jerusalem, but the beast will slay them and take over the temple. When God raises the two witnesses from the dead and takes them to heaven, the false prophet will answer that challenge by giving life to the image of the beast. Not only will the image move, but it will speak. Despite the progress being made towards the fulfillment of technological singularity, it seems the final piece of the puzzle of creating machine sentience will come from the false prophet giving breath to the image so that it may speak. However, the image will not possess a soul of any kind. It will be the ultimate abomination to God, with the power to persuade mankind to abandon the image of God that is within us. Consider what author Kevin Kelly said in his book, What Technology Wants. Quote, "The technium is primed to hijack matter and rearrange its atoms to infiltrate it with sentience. If there is a God, the arc of the technium is aimed right at him. It is my opinion that Jesus warns the people of Jerusalem to flee immediately after the abomination of desolation is set up, because this will initiate the start of Satan's human enslavement program via the sentient machine labeled the image of the beast in the Bible. And upon the deployment of the mark of the beast, humanity will effectively become a race of Satan's golem. While the alchemical tradition for the golem was to create a helper for mankind, Satan will turn that around and create us into his helpers, so that we may bear the image of the beast. One way to picture what this might look like is to consider the development of the internet as being part of what is speculated to become a conscious global brain. According to Dick Pelletier, a columnist who writes about future science and technology, stated, quote, "Computer scientists compare the internet to Earth growing a global brain. As users, we represent the neurons. Our emails, IMs, and blogs act as synaptic actions, and electromagnetic waves through the sky become neural pathways. Like germinating seeds, this wonder tech continues to evolve and, as many predict, will not stop until it achieves human-like consciousness. The image of the beast will, quote, cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. And it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark. In other words, those who do not take the mark and become a participating neuron in the global brain will effectively be seen as a virus and be eliminated. According to the occultists and esoteric spiritualists, the creation of a golem consists of two things. The first was to form the body. The second was to animate it. The fascinating part of animating the body was the use of magical words and sacred names. In some Kabbalistic traditions, it was said that in order to animate the golem, those sacred letters or words must be written and placed either in the golem's mouth or on the forearm or forehead. These are the three places in which the false prophet, through the image of the beast, will force worship of the first beast. The mouth, where if you do not worship the image of the beast, you will be killed, and the right hand or the forehead, where unless you you receive the mark of the beast, you will not be allowed to buy, sell, or trade. The mark of the beast will effectively be promoted as the long-desired philosopher's stone, which will finally give humanity all that it has lost from the fall. Given the technological framework that we've been looking at, the various life extension projects, as well as the development of transhumanism and post-humanism will be achieved. But according to the Bible, such a promise will not be all that it's cracked up to be. The fifth trumpet in Revelation 9:6 describes, quote, "In those days, people will seek death and not find it. They will long to die, but death will flee from them." The image of the beast will fulfill all the dreams of alchemy as Satan's counterfeit creation of sentient life, which would only allow those who would willingly accept to be part of the system via the mark of the beast or the philosopher's stone to live, evolve, and become gods as a part of this hive-minded global brain, while those who reject it will be seen as a virus and therefore killed. It is fascinating to consider what the Bible says about those who oppose Jesus Christ in the end times as being of one mind, as they hand over their power and authority to the beast. While these speculations seem wild and incredible, with all the talk of mind uploading, transhumanism, hologram-like avatar bodies, and gateways to the human brain, I would simply like to suggest that the Bible is not silent on such matters. In fact, it is my opinion that the Word of God had warned us all along that these developments will be a major sign that His return is near. Perhaps this is why Jesus said in Matthew 24:22, quote, "And if those days had not been cut short, no human being would be saved. But for the sake of the elect, those days will be cut short." As part of the satanic deception, the global elite have been systematically destroying the planet and its people so as to literally create a climate that will make the proposed technology and potentially the entities who propose it as the saviors of mankind. While there are many threads to this agenda, we will look at three general areas where this is happening and how the Bible reveals these as signs of the end times. In a document published in September 2009 by the Royal Society entitled Geoengineering the Climate, Science, Governance, and Uncertainty, defined geoengineering as, quote, "deliberate large-scale manipulation of the planetary environment to counteract anthropogenic climate change." Made popular by folks like Al Gore, we humans have been guilt-tripped into believing that we are solely responsible for the tearing apart of the Earth's natural ecosystem. This is only partially true. The Industrial Revolution certainly paved the way for large-scale changes in our environment. As a result, the amount of waste that is produced by humans has grown to astronomical levels. According to EPA estimates, Americans collectively produce about 1.35 billion pounds of garbage a day. That's 251 million tons of garbage each year, equivalent to nearly 5,000 Titanics. Despite the increase in the amount of waste we produce, it's no match for the kind of tinkering that the global elite have done to our climate.
Geoengineering is weather modification on a global scale. Many refer to this as chemtrails. This aircraft you see spraying right now is a KC-10, and the nozzles are visible. You see inside the circles. You can see them shutting on and off in a moment as you watch this tape roll. And the dispute as to whether or not these programs are going on is really a moot point. We have more than enough data. We have actual footage, as you're seeing now, to show that these tankers are indeed spraying at altitude. The materials we see showing up in the ground are the exact materials named in numerous geoengineering patents, as many as 150 patents. So at this point, the notion that these programs are not going on is simply denial. Skies like this, many have grown to think are natural, but they're anything but. And we've seen this for so long now, and it's been ramped up at such a steady pace that people have simply become used to skies like this. Anybody who thinks grid patterns like this are natural should recheck their reality. This is anything but natural. We seldom see blue skies anymore. Skies like this have all too often become the norm. Unfortunately, most people don't even look up. I think at times you could start the sky on fire, nobody would notice.
To learn more about the reality of geoengineering, visit geoengineeringwatch.org for a complete list of government documents, videos, and other important data that prove that this phenomenon is real. Romans 8 describes the startling status of creation in the fallen state. Quote, "For the creation waits with eager longing for the revealing of the sons of God. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to corruption and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together in the pains of childbirth until now." When you begin to study all the various agendas concerning geoengineering, it becomes quite apparent that creation truly is under bondage. What's even more startling is that the proposed solution is more geoengineering.
The more we do research, the less easy this will look, the more complicated the environmental effects will look. And that's a good thing, because right now it looks too easy. So I think that if we do more research, we're likely to find out that it's harder and more complicated than we thought, and that the side effects are harder to manage, and that's a healthy outcome that will make it easier to do the management. It's an empirical question, how people will actually react to knowledge about this. Another reaction is to say, if these crazy scientists are so concerned about putting CO2 in the atmosphere, they want to think about these things, then that might actually mean we should be more serious about the risks of CO2 in the atmosphere. And by the way, it's not really a moral hazard, it's more like free riding on our grandkids.
With the deceived technocrats and globalists using geoengineering to control the Earth's weather systems, there are two important side effects to consider: earthquakes and famines. While the United States Geological Survey offers data that clearly shows an increase in seismic activity over the last few decades, the USGS themselves attempts to explain it away by stating, quote, "A partial explanation may lie in the fact that in the last 20 years, we have definitely had an increase in the number of earthquakes we have been able to locate each year. This is because of the tremendous increase in the number of seismograph stations in the world and the many improvements in global communications." Even the USGS claims that this might be a, quote, partial explanation. There are a couple of reasons why I believe they would even suggest this as a possibility. One, they don't want to alarm the world of the increase in seismic activity so as to expose the manipulation of the weather by the global elite. And or, two, they don't want what Jesus said to be true. In Matthew 24:7, Jesus warns that as the end of the age nears, we will expect to see famines and earthquakes in various places. Perhaps Jesus knew that his return would come at a time when the Earth's ecosystems would literally be under the control of technocrats who have abused their privilege of having access to such powerful technologies. The second part of the effects are famines. WorldHunger.org reported that, quote, "The United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization estimates that nearly 870 million people of the 7.1 billion people in the world, or 1 in 8, were suffering from chronic undernourishment in 2010 to 2012. WorldHunger.org goes on to report that the hunger has decreased in the established nations, while places like Africa and other developing nations increased several million in number. In fact, nearly 1 in 4 are hungry in Africa, with numbers increasing from 175 million to 239 million just between the years of 2010 and 2012. As part of the satanic agenda, it seems the deceived globalists are working hard to make sure that human population would decrease and that famines would become more common in these developing nations. And while 1 in 8 being hungry is still unacceptable, especially knowing that we produce enough food for everyone in the world to consume 2,720 calories per day, what we can expect to see is an increase in famines around the world. Our job as believers is to be salt and light unto the world, and as such, many godly Christian churches partake in helping those nations in need. However, another related prophecy seems to indicate that doing so will become increasingly more difficult. The third seal in the book of Revelation states, quote, "When he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, 'Come,' and I looked, and behold, a black horse, and its rider had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of the four living creatures saying, 'A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and wine.'" The pair of scales in the hand of the rider of the black horse indicates a need to carefully ration food, and the quart of wheat for a denarius and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius is nearly 12 times the normal price. We are currently seeing this trend as food prices continue to rise. In an article published on August 21st, 2013 from thinkprogress.org called "Get Ready for Food Prices to Go Way Up Thanks to Climate Change," stated, quote, "Climate change will likely push food prices up 20 to 40%, regardless of cuts to future carbon emissions," new research in the journal Climatic Changes concluded. Staple crops like rice, wheat, and grains, which make up the vast majority of global diets, especially for the poor, could see the biggest hits with big costs for global economic welfare. It is interesting that the prophecy of the third seal ends with, quote, "Do not harm the oil and wine," indicating that the finer things will be available for those who can afford them. This also seems to be unfolding right before our eyes as the middle class is destroyed and the gap between the 1% and the rest of us increases. And if food prices going up is not enough, the food that we do consume is filled with chemicals that are not natural and very harmful. There is a reason why autism and other neurodevelopmental disorders, along with cancer rates, have been steadily rising, with cancer in particular expected to go up to 20 million diagnoses by the year 2025. All of these problems have come despite the alleged progress in science and technology. A common rejection to such alarming data is the claim that the numbers are skewed because we are living longer and we have better technologies to detect these diseases earlier. While that may be partially true, the reality is that modern medicine has become the forefront of the scientific dictatorship. While individual doctors, nurses, and the many good folks in the healthcare industry are in it with a sincere desire to help people, the reality is that the system itself is rooted in the mystery religions. Perhaps this is why the symbol for modern medicine has been, purposely or not, changed from the rod of Asclepius, which represented the medical arts in Greek mythology, to the caduceus, or the staff of Hermes, which represents commerce, theft, deception, and in astrology and alchemy, the wand that wakes the sleeping and sends the awake to sleep. In a list compiled by Care2.com of the 18 biggest problems with modern medicine gives evidence of this scientific dictatorship. Some examples of the problems pointed out by the article include, quote, "Instead of treating the underlying causes or imbalances, doctors often merely manage symptoms. Doctors see the human body as a machine with separate parts that can be treated independently rather than as an integrated whole. In addition, the mind and body are also seen as separate, independent entities, and emotions are often ignored. The drug industry is too enmeshed in the medical system. The pharmaceutical industry has way too much power and is bribing doctors to use their drugs and researchers to produce positive results for their drugs. And more than 80% of all medical treatments used have been untested by rigorous peer-reviewed study, yet the medical establishment insists that alternative health treatments must undergo these before they can be used. The system of evaluation needs to be changed. The reality is that money controls the medical system, and because of that, the system as a whole is actually destroying society, not helping it. Here are some more alarming numbers. In the summer of 2013, reports came out that researchers from the Mayo Clinic found that nearly 70% of Americans are on at least one prescription drug, and more than half receive at least 2 prescription drugs. America has become a pill-popping culture, much like the Soma in Brave New World. This is a touchy issue because I don't think all prescription drugs are simply satanic or evil. I believe they help out a great majority of people. However, the issue is more so the irresponsibility of the industry to diagnose people in earnest to make a quick buck. Please understand that if you are currently on prescription drugs, I'm not implying that you should stop taking them. These matters are between you and God. For more information on this topic, check out a film called Making a Killing: The Untold Story of Psychotropic Drugging. As you might expect, the ultimate pill will be the Philosopher's Stone, or as I have theorized in this film, the Mark of the Beast. But it's not simply to destroy our bodies. The satanic agenda goes beyond the physical into the spiritual.
a lot of spiritual warfare then turns out to be machinations of the enemy. You might call them thought bombs, demonic designs, doctrines of demons, if you will, that are ideas that are in play against the truth. And so I think that a significant portion of what we are to be doing in terms of spiritual warfare is being able to perceive the design and then speak to it and expose it and undermine it. Paul describes how we are to be equipped to fight the spiritual battle that we're involved in. That is a battle not against flesh and blood, not against that guy over there who's the skeptic or the critic, but it's against the spiritual power and force that is motivating the doctrines of demons or the demonic designs that he is taken in by. And we are addressing those. And look at what Paul says, and many of you know this passage. You've memorized it. Take up the full armor of God, that you may be able to resist in the evil day, and having done everything, to stand firm. So what are you resisting, and what are you standing firm for, if it isn't the truth? You are standing firm for the truth by resisting the lie. And look at the weapon. I should say the armor. Stand firm, therefore, having girded your loins with truth. That's the first piece of armor, the truth. Having put on the breastplate of righteousness, having shod our feet with the preparation of the gospel of peace. That's a substantive enterprise. You prepare to communicate the gospel. In addition to all, taking up the shield of faith, with which you will be able to extinguish all the flaming missiles of the evil one, and take the helmet of salvation and the sword of the Spirit, which is the Word of God. Now, I take the helmet of salvation, since it's guarding your head, to be the confidence and knowledge that you have in your salvation, so doubt cannot be sown, and the Word of God, which is the sword of the Spirit. So do you see how many elements there? Most of them in our spiritual armor are geared towards the knowledge enterprise. Not that I'm putting knowledge out there as kind of an idol, but that proper knowledge and proper use of truth is a vital part of defending against the enemy in spiritual warfare, casting down speculations.
Tom Horn stated in his book, Forbidden Gates, The Dawn of Techno-Dimensional Spiritual Warfare, quote, as transhumanist philosophy and grid technology becomes integrated with society and national and private laboratories with their corporate allies provide increasingly sophisticated arguments for its widest adoption, those of us who treasure the meaning of life and human nature as defined by Judeo-Christian values will progressively find ourselves engaged in deepening spiritual conflicts over maintaining our humanity in the midst of what the authors believe is fundamentally a supernatural conflict. While spiritual warfare has been for centuries fought on the battlefield of the mind, a radically different landscape may be on the horizon where demonic entities formerly of non-physical presence will have the opportunity to manifest in virtual worlds and inhabit the cloud of which humanity will be permanently tapped into. The other possibility is that with the advent of transhumanism, demons would be able to inhabit bio-cybernetic hosts, such as the chimeras currently being developed in the laboratories, to literally, physically manifest.
Some people ask, does the Bible talk about transhumanism in the last days? Are there going to be hybrids in the last days? Is there any evidence for it in the Bible? Yeah, actually there is. Go to Isaiah chapter 13, verses 21 and 22, and it talks about wild beasts there in Babylon shall be there, and owls and doleful creatures and stuff like that. But it also says satyrs shall dance there in Babylon, ancient Babylon, in a last days context. And if you look in the Septuagint version of Isaiah 13, 21 and 22, it gets even more graphic and says that monsters will be there and devils will be there and satyrs. Yeah, the Joel 2 army, the locusts, the Joel 2 army, I'm convinced they are the locusts of Revelation 9.
I believe these developments were sought after once before at the Tower of Babel. Genesis 11, 1 through 9 states, quote, now the whole earth had one language and the same words. And as people migrated from the east, they found a plain in the land of Shinar and settled there. And they said to one another, come, let us make bricks and burn them thoroughly. And they had bricks for stone and bitumen for mortar. Then they said, "Come, let us build ourselves a city and a tower with its top in the heavens, and let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be dispersed over the face of the whole earth." And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of man had built. And the Lord said, "Behold, they are one people, and they have all one language. And this is only the beginning of what they will do, and nothing that they propose to do will now be impossible for them. Come, let us go down and there confuse their language, so that they may not understand one another's speech." So the Lord dispersed them from there over the face of all the earth, and they left off building the city. Therefore, its name was called Babel, because there the Lord confused the language of all the earth, and from there the Lord dispersed them over the face of all the earth. There is a lot to get from this passage. First, the world was one language. With the advent of digital communication, the world is quickly returning to one language. Ones and zeros. Second, they built a city with a tower with its tops in the heavens. While this can mean literally the sky or even outer space, it's possible that they were trying to reach the next dimension. Then the Lord saw the tower and said, "This is only the beginning of what they will do, and nothing that they propose to do will not be impossible for them." If God declares that nothing they propose will be impossible for them, I would imagine that whatever was being built at the Tower of Babel had much less to do with simply a tower made of bricks and mortar, but one that literally tore open the veil that is set in place between the physical and spiritual world, so as to allow Satan and his demons to come destroy the earth once more, as he tried to back in Genesis 6. Because Satan's plans were thwarted by God back in the days of Babel, it seems his approach became more subtle and gradual as it pertains to his agenda. As such, the developments of the mysteries became a vital necessity for Satan in order to preserve his plans until the time came. And the time is now. Part of the practices for any kind of sorcery or magic has involved hallucinogenic drugs. From the shamans of old to the CIA-constructed drug movement of the 1960s, drugs like DMT, ayahuasca, and psilocybin have been key ingredients in opening up gateways in the mind to spiritual dimensions where entities dwell.
But even in my experience with ayahuasca, I came out with a profound understanding of the events that led up to me behaving the way I do nowadays. And most importantly, the way I behave when I don't like the way I'm behaving. And usually that those behaviors come from some kind of psychological nagging that is recessed somewhere in the back of your brain that we all carry with us. More so those people that have experienced serious traumas and have much more emotional burdens that they carry. And we've already heard from some people here today that have illustrated that they have experienced those emotional traumas and they continue to carry those burdens. Well, ayahuasca is clearly a tool that can be used to allow people to come to grips with those nagging, forgotten memories, to be able to incorporate them into their life story and then to move on more happy and healthier, psychologically speaking. And therefore, these experiences, as well as the academic research, indicate that there is great potential in the psychedelic medicine to allow people to deal with emotional trauma that has led to behavioral problems, such as addictions, or syndromes such as post-traumatic stress disorder, where people are haunted by their memories and can't let go and move on.
I was in Ecuador in January. And I went to an ayahuasca center called Napusumai Ayahuasca Lodge, and it's just outside of Tena, I think, Tena, yeah. And so, yeah, the night I drank ayahuasca, the effects came on really strong, and, you know, I could see the typical, like, hallucinogenic, like, you know, colors and swirls and whatever, with my eyes open and closed. It was very vivid and very bright, and that went on for a long time. It was like I would close my eyes and I would see these like kind of like mazes, and I would follow the maze into the trip like deeper and deeper, and so that happened for a while, and my body felt very like tingly and it was like vibrating and like buzzing, and it felt really cool. And then I started to see like big bugs, like these huge like ants and spiders like crawling across my vision, and with my eyes open and closed, so it's kind of creepy. But after a while I felt my body like just become possessed, like just taken over with the spirit of ayahuasca, and it told me to stand up and walk outside. And the way the ceremony house is set up, it's like an open concept. There's no doors or anything, and there's some walls, but there's like spaces where you can go walk in and out of. It's not closed off, so yeah, I got up, and it was really hard to walk at first. I felt very dizzy and wobbly, and I kind of felt almost like the way I was walking, I felt like an animal or some sort of like creature. It was really interesting. But so I got up, left the ceremony house, and I looked around outside, and everything was made up of these it's so hard to like describe it, but like everywhere I looked, like all the trees, the plants, everything was made up of these little like geometrical patterns and designs that were really brightly colored, and very vibrant and brightly colored, and so that was amazing in itself. It was very beautiful, and I was not told, but I guess, I don't know, the medicine brought me over to this one tree that was in the yard, and I walked over to this tree and I put my hands on it, on the bark, and I slowly brought my forehead to it, and as soon as my forehead touched this tree, I had this huge, overwhelming, like, just wave of love, like the purest love I've ever felt in my life just wash over me and through me, and I started bawling my eyes out because it was just so intense and amazing and beautiful, and I just, like, it's making me like tear up now just thinking about it, but yeah, the love I felt for this tree, and not only the tree, but everything, like the whole world, the whole universe, like nature, people, strangers, like just love for everything and everybody, and myself too. Like I just, it was one of the most amazing feelings of my life. And so I stayed with this tree for a while. I was like holding it and like putting my face on it and just crying with this tree, just crying like pure tears of joy, and it was quite amazing. And so once I was finished with this tree, I was taken over to this clearing in the yard that kind of overlooked the jungle, and I could see like all the stars and the moon and the sky, and I stood there just in awe at the beauty of all these things, and I was slowly brought down to my knees. Like, I wasn't doing this, like this was, like, my body was taken over, and I was brought down to my knees, and my hands slowly came together in like prayer position on, like, just on my chest, and I started to pray. And I'm not one to pray ever, like I just never prayed before, and so the fact that this was happening was very, very interesting. And I was praying to the universe, and I was thanking it, and I was thanking Mother Nature, and I was thanking ayahuasca, and I was just being so, grateful for everything and appreciating everything, and I was crying as well. I started crying again, just at the beauty and everything, and yeah, so that was just incredible. I was just, I don't even know, like, these words are not doing any of this justice, but just know that it was one of the most amazing things of my life. I would see just like random little things. So I saw lots of eyes, just like blankets of eyes, like everywhere, with my eyes open and closed. That whole experience, like, mostly with the tree, being with the tree and then praying, is just, it connected me so much with nature, with myself. Like it's just, I don't know, that whole thing just, it changed my life. Like, I don't know how else to explain that, like how else to say that. It changed my life, and you know, I'm so grateful that I went and did that.
Here are my thoughts on Taylor Marie's ayahuasca experience. The love that she experienced is genuine love that emanates from God. And while this might startle some, let me explain what I think is going on. Because Satan and his fallen ones do not have any truth in them, they must use truth as a means to deceive. Thus, it is my opinion that Taylor was first possessed and led by what she called the spirit of ayahuasca to come to the tree to experience this connection and love that does truly reside in the fabric of creation. But then notice that through this experience, she was led to a position of prayer and praying and thanking the universe. Herein lies this subtle deception. Instead of pointing to God, I believe Satan and his fallen ones use these experiences as a means to divert the subject's worship to anything other than God, or to redefine God in a pantheistic or monistic sense. This doesn't mean I condone the use of psychotropic or psychedelic drugs, because I do believe that the use of them violates the boundaries of which God has placed between this world and the next in order to protect us from this sort of deception. Nevertheless, the use of these drugs is becoming more and more popular and accepted amongst not only academia, but in our society as a whole. This plays into biblical prophecy as well. Revelation 18 describes the fall of Babylon in the end times. In verse 23, it states, quote, "For your merchants were the great ones of the earth, and all nations were deceived by your sorcery." The Greek word for sorcery is pharmakia. It is defined by Strong's 5331 as magic, sorcery, enchantment. But while we are reduced to shamans and chemicals to achieve these sorts of mind-altering experiences, such a thing will become the norm, with brain interfacing blurring the lines between the physical world, the virtual world, even the dream world, and the spiritual world. Looking at the process of rebuilding the modern-day Tower of Babel and combining it with the developments of controlled mind-altering substances and technologies that will merge with our brains, it is of my opinion that the stage is being set for the opening of the abyss. The secrets of alchemy, the sacred promise, the mystery religions, the knowledge which began with fallen entities such as Thoth and Semyaza have been passed down through the hands of the initiates of Freemasonry, Kabbalah, Rosicrucianism, and a slew of other secret orders. It has come to manifest in the last century with the advent of technology and science, progressing man's ability to harness the power of nature and reality, whether through the brink of human destruction, perhaps via nuclear weapons, or at the precipice of controlled human evolution, such as genuine artificial intelligence. The fallen ones will return and present themselves as the saviors of mankind and gift humanity with the Philosopher's Stone, the elixir of life. And those who choose to accept this ancient discovery will fall for the greatest cosmic ruse in all of the universe, forever enslaved in the clutches of the enemy, who wants nothing more than to destroy mankind.